Ever feel like understanding your medication is like trying to decode another language?
Yeah, it really can be sometimes.
Well, today we're hoping to hand you the Rosetta Stone for Pioglitazone. It's a name you might have heard, especially, if you or someone you know is managing type 2 diabetes.
And you've shared just a wealth of information on pioglitazone with us. We've really dug into it all. I mean, everything from how it actually works in your body, its journey through all the regulatory hoops, and even some, well, surprising real-world impacts it's had.
Right.
Our mission today, really just to give you the clear, need-to-know insights, without all the overwhelming jargon, if we can help it.
Exactly. We're about to do a deep dive into the, frankly, quite intriguing story of pioglitazone. Where did it come from? What's its main job inside your body? The science behind it. We'll touch on things like pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics, how your body handles it and what it does, but we promise to make it understandable.
We'll keep it clear.
Yeah. How it's made, the rules and regs surrounding it, and even touch on its broader effects, like on the economy and, well, maybe even culturally to some extent.
Definitely.
Think of this as your personal guided tour through this really important medication. So let's start at the beginning. Where does this story kick off?
Okay, so the story of pioglitazone really, it starts back in 1982. Scientists at a company called Takeda discovered this compound, siglitazone.
Siglitazone, okay.
Now, what made siglitazone stand out was that it was the first of a whole new class of drugs. They're called thiazolidinediones, TZDs for short.
TZDs, right. I've heard that term.
And what it did in animal models was lower blood sugar in a totally new way compared to the older drugs, like sulfonylureas. It didn't just force the body to pump out more insulin.
Ah, okay. So that's the key difference then. Instead of just telling the pancreas, make more insulin, it was doing something else.
Precisely. It was working on insulin resistance.
Yeah.
Think of it like your cells weren't listening properly to the insulin your body was making.
Mm.
Siglitazone helped make them, well, more receptive.
Interesting. So it tackles the sensitivity issue.
Exactly. Now, siglitazone itself, it never actually made it to market. There were some toxicity issues that popped up in studies.
Raw.
But it was still a pivotal moment. It proved this whole approach, targeting insulin sensitivity, could actually work. And that really sparked a race. Other big pharma companies like Sankyo and SmithKline Beecham jumped in, trying to find better, safer versions in the same TZD family.
So siglitazone was kind of the proof of concept, the spark that lit the fire for this whole area.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, it laid the groundwork. The search continued, and eventually a drug called troglitazone became the first TZD that actually reached patients. That was in 1997.
Okay, so troglitazone got there first.
It did. But its time on the market was, well, unfortunately pretty short. It got recalled in 2000.
Recalled. Why?
Concerns about liver toxicity. Serious ones.
Wow. Okay, that must have been a pretty significant setback then. Probably raised a lot of questions about the safety of this entire class of drugs, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It was a major challenge. But, the underlying science, the idea of improving insulin sensitivity, still seemed really promising. Researchers learned a lot from the problems with troglitazone.
Right.
And those development efforts continued, which ultimately led to the launch of pioglitazone, offering another option within this TZD class.
Okay, so that brings us to pioglitazone itself. Fast forward to today, what are the main situations where it's actually used in clinical practice?
So pioglitazone is primarily indicated as what we call a second or third line treatment for type 2 diabetes in adults. It's often considered particularly for patients who are also overweight.
Second or third line, meaning not usually the first thing doctors try.
Generally, yes. It can be used as what's called monotherapy, meaning on its own, or more commonly, perhaps, it's used in combination with other standard diabetes medications, things like metformin, sulfonylureas, or even insulin.
Okay.
That's typically for people who aren't quite getting their blood sugar under control with their existing treatment plan.
And I assume we have solid evidence, like clinical trials, showing that it actually helps in those situations.
Oh, absolutely. Numerous clinical trials have demonstrated that when you add pioglitazone to existing treatments, whether that's sulfonylureas, metformin, or insulin, it leads to statistically significant improvements in blood sugar control.
How do they measure that improvement?
They look at key markers, specifically HbA1c, which gives you that average picture of blood sugar levels over, say, the last 3 months or so.
Right, the A1C test.
Exactly. And also fasting plasma glucose, which is, your blood sugar level first thing in the morning before you eat. Pioglitazone helps bring both of those down.
Now, you mentioned earlier its journey. I remember seeing information, maybe some controversy about pioglitazone and its effects on the heart and blood vessels. That's obviously a huge concern for people with type 2 diabetes.
Yes, that is a really critical point, and it's something researchers look at very closely. There was a major study called the POACTIVE study.
Proactive. Okay.
Yeah, it stands for Prospective Pioglitazone Clinical Trial in Macrovascular Events. Quite a mouthful.
Hey, sounds like it.
But it's specifically designed to investigate this cardiovascular question. It involved, I think, over 5,000 people. All had type 2 diabetes and also a prior history of cardiovascular disease, like a heart attack or stroke.
So, a high-risk group, what did they find?
Well, it's a bit nuanced. The study's main goal, its primary endpoint, looked at a pretty broad combination of different cardiovascular events. And on that main goal, pioglitazone didn't show a statistically significant benefit across the board.
Okay. So, not a home run on the main target.
Not on the primary one, no. But, and this is important, the researchers also looked at a more specific set of outcomes. This is called the main secondary endpoint.
Okay, what did that include?
It focused on the combination of death from any cause, a non-fatal heart attack, or MI, myocardial infarction, or stroke. And for that specific combination, there was a statistically significant decrease seen in the patients taking pioglitazone.
Oh, interesting. So, even though it didn't hit that broad primary goal, it did seem to offer some protection against these really critical, hard endpoints.
Exactly, that's how many interpreted it. And when they dug even deeper into the proactive data in later analyses, things got even more interesting.
How so?
Well, some analyses suggested more specific benefits, like potentially reducing the risk of having a recurrent heart attack. And there were also hints of potential anti-atherogenic effects, meaning slowing down the hardening of the arteries.
Really? How would it do that?
Well, for instance, another study called the Chicago study indicated it might reduce the thickness of the carotid artery wall, that's a key artery in your neck, and thickening there is a sign of atherosclerosis. This effect might be linked, possibly, to pioglitazone's ability to increase levels of HDL cholesterol.
The good cholesterol.
That's the one, yeah.
It.
HDL is thought to help clear plaque from arteries.
Okay. And what about stroke specifically? Any insights there?
Yeah, another important trial called the IRS trial, that's short for insulin resistance intervention, after stroke, looked at pioglitazone specifically in people who were insulin resistant and had recently had either a stroke or a TIA, a transient ischemic attack, sometimes called a mini stroke.
Right.
And that study suggested a potential benefit in lowering the risk of what they called MAVIS, major adverse cardiovascular events, in patients who already had established cardiovascular disease.
So quite a complex picture on the cardiovascular front, but with some definite signals of potential benefit, especially in certain high-risk groups.
That's a fair summary, yes.
Yeah.
It's not straightforward, but there's evidence suggesting benefits beyond just blood sugar control.
Okay. Now, besides its main job in diabetes and these potential cardiovascular effects, you mentioned it's being looked at for other things. Any other conditions where pioglitazone is being investigated?
Yeah, there's actually ongoing research in several different areas, which is pretty interesting. Some studies, for example, have explored whether it might help improve symptoms of psoriasis, which is an inflammatory skin condition.
Psoriasis, huh?
Okay. There's also been research in animal models, so very early stage, suggesting it might potentially have a role in treating opioid use disorder.
Yeah, that's unexpected.
It is. And another area is Alzheimer's disease. Preclinical studies, again, mostly in labs and animals, look promising, but the clinical trials conducted in humans with Alzheimer's haven't really yielded conclusive results so far. So the jury's still out on that one.
It's really remarkable, though, isn't it, how a drug initially developed for one specific purpose, like diabetes, can show potential in such diverse areas.
It really highlights how interconnected biological pathways can be.
Okay, so we've got a good handle now on what pioglitazone is used for, but how does it actually work? What's going on inside the body at a cellular level?
Right, the mechanism of action. So the primary way pioglitazone works is by activating a very specific type of receptor inside your cells. It's called the peroxisome proliferator activated receptor gamma. Let's just call it PPARγ.
PPARγ, got it. Rolls right off the tongue.
Tuckles, yeah, not exactly. But think of PPARγ as kind of like a master switch inside certain cells, particularly fat cells and muscle cells. When pioglitazone comes along and binds to it, it activates this switch.
Okay, it flips the PPARγ switch, and what happens then?
Well, PPARγ doesn't work alone. It actually comes in two main forms, PPARγ 1 and 2. And it needs to partner up with another receptor called the retinoid X receptor, or RXR. They form a team, a heterodimer.
Okay, so PPARγ and RXR team up when pioglitazone is present.
Exactly. And this activated team then goes and influences which genes inside the cell nucleus get turned on or off. It changes gene expression.
And the result of those gene changes is?
The ultimate result is improved insulin sensitivity. The muscle and fat tissues become much better at responding to insulin and taking up glucose from the bloodstream. It also dials down the amount of glucose being produced unnecessarily by the liver.
So it's tackling those core issues in type 2 diabetes, the cells ignoring insulin, and the liver making too much sugar right at the genetic level almost.
That's a good way to think about it, yeah. It's reprogramming the cells to be more insulin sensitive.
And does it do anything else besides affecting glucose?
Yes, it does. Activating PPARγ also has significant effects on how your body handles fats, or lipids. It often leads to a decrease in triglycerides, that's a type of fat in your blood.
Right.
And, as we mentioned earlier, it often increases HDL-C, that good cholesterol.
Okay, so effects on both sugar and fats.
And potentially one more thing. It might also modify the secretion of certain hormones produced by fat tissue itself. These are called adipokines. And changes in these adipokines can further contribute to improved insulin sensitivity throughout the body.
Fascinating. It's clearly doing a lot more than just one simple thing.
Definitely a multifaceted mechanism.
Okay, that gives us a much clearer picture of how it works. Now let's talk about the journey of the drug through the body. You take a pioglitazone tablet. What happens next? The pharmacokinetics.
Right. So after you take it orally, pioglitazone gets absorbed into your bloodstream pretty reliably. It usually reaches its highest concentration, its peak level, within about 2 hours.
Does taking it with food make a difference?
It can slow down the absorption a bit. That peak time might get delayed to maybe 3 or 4 hours if you take it with a meal. But, and this is key, the total amount of the drug that actually gets absorbed into your system, what you call the AUC, or area under the curve, isn't significantly affected by food.
Okay, so it still all gets in eventually, just maybe a bit slower with food. Once it's in the bloodstream, where does it go? Does it spread out evenly?
It distributes quite well throughout the body. We measure this using something called the apparent volume of distribution, and for pioglitazone, it's around 0.63 liters per kilogram of body weight, which suggests decent tissue penetration. Another important point is that it's very highly bound to proteins in your blood plasma.
Protein bound, what does that mean?
It means that most of the drug molecules circulating in your blood aren't free. They're attached, mostly to a protein called albumin. Over 99% of pioglitazone is bound like this.
Does that affect how it works?
It affects how much free drug is available to actually get into tissues and activate those PPARγ receptors. It also influences how long it stays in the body and how it's eliminated. Interestingly, the active forms that pioglitazone gets converted into are also highly protein-bound.
Ah, active forms. So the body doesn't just use pioglitazone as is, it breaks it down into other things that also work.
That's exactly right. Pioglitazone undergoes quite extensive metabolism, primarily in the liver. It gets processed through chemical reactions called hydroxylation and oxidation.
And specific enzymes do that job.
Yes. The main enzyme responsible is called CYP2C8. Another one, CYP3A4, plays a lesser role. These enzymes convert pioglitazone into active metabolites. The most important ones are known as MIT and MIV.
So these MIT and MIV metabolites also contribute to the drug's effect.
They do. They are also active PPARγ agonists. And then these metabolites undergo further processing called conjugation. They get tagged with glucuronide or sulfate molecules, which generally makes them easier to excrete.
Okay, so how long do pioglitazone and these active metabolites actually stick around in the body? What's the half-life?
The original pioglitazone molecule itself actually has a fairly short half-life in the blood serum, typically somewhere between 3 and 7 hours.
That seems quite short for a drug often taken once a day.
It does, but remember those active metabolites, M3 and MIV, they have much longer half-lives, somewhere in the range of 16 to 24 hours.
Ah, okay. So even after the original drug levels drop, these active metabolites hang around much longer, continuing the effect.
Precisely. Their longer duration is a key reason why pioglitazone can often be dosed just once daily.
Makes sense. And how does the body finally get rid of pioglitazone and all its byproducts? Elimination.
Well, a portion of it, maybe around 15 to 30% of the original dose, is eventually recovered in the urine, but mostly in the form of those metabolites, not the original drug.
So not primarily through the kidneys, then?
It seems not. The presumed major route of elimination is actually through the bile, produced by the liver, which then gets excreted into the digestive tract and ultimately leaves the body in the feces.
Okay, interesting. What about people whose organs aren't working perfectly? Say, someone with kidney problems or liver issues. Does that change how their body handles pioglitazone?
That's a really important practical question. Interestingly, for kidney impairment, even moderate or severe kidney disease, the half-life of pioglitazone and its active metabolites doesn't seem to change significantly.
So no dose adjustment needed for kidney patients.
Generally, no dose adjustments are recommended based on kidney function alone. Now, for the liver, it's a bit different. For mild to moderate liver impairment, dose adjustments usually aren't required either, but doctors are advised to use caution.
But what about more severe liver problems?
Yeah, that's where you have to be careful. Starting pioglitazone is actually contraindicated, meaning it shouldn't be done in patients who have active liver disease, or if their liver enzyme levels, specifically ALT, are significantly elevated, say more than 2.5 times the upper limit of what's considered normal.
And monitoring is needed.
Absolutely. Liver function tests should be monitored periodically during treatment. And if those ALT levels climb too high, say over 3 times the normal limit, or if the patient develops jaundice, yellowing of the skin or eyes, the drug should be stopped.
Okay, so liver health is definitely a key consideration. Are there any significant interactions with other medications people should be aware of? Drug interactions?
Yes. Since pioglitazone is primarily broken down by that CYP2C8 enzyme, other drugs that affect CYP2C8 can be an issue.
Oh, so.
Well, drugs that inhibit CYP2C8 can slow down the metabolism of pioglitazone, potentially leading to higher levels of it in the body. A classic example is gemfibrozil, which is a drug used to lower cholesterol and triglycerides. Taking gemfibrozil with pioglitazone can significantly increase pioglitazone exposure.
So doctors need to be aware of that combination. Does pioglitazone itself affect other drugs?
Based on studies, pioglitazone doesn't appear to be a strong inducer or inhibitor of other major CYP enzymes. So it's less likely to significantly mess with the levels of many other common medications.
Okay. And just to recap the pharmacodynamics, how it affects the body, the key point is improving insulin sensitivity, right? Not making more insulin.
Exactly. That's its core pharmacodynamic effect. It makes your existing insulin work better without directly stimulating the pancreas to release more. That distinguishes it from some other classes of diabetes drugs.
Got it. Okay, we've covered how it works and how the body handles it. Let's switch gears now to how it's actually made, the manufacturing process. What goes into creating pioglitazone tablets?
Sure. The synthesis of drugs in the thiazolidinedione family, like pioglitazone, usually involves a series of chemical reactions. Often they start with relatively simple chemical building blocks, things like thiourea and chloroacetic acid.
Okay, basic chemicals.
Right. These react to form an intermediate structure, kind of a core ring structure called 2-imino-4-thiazolidinone. This then serves as the foundation, and further chemical modifications are made to build the specific pioglitazone molecule with its unique side chains.
Is this like old school chemistry, or are there modern improvements to the process?
Well, like in many areas of pharmaceutical manufacturing, there's definitely a push towards developing greener and more efficient synthesis methods.
Greener how?
For instance, researchers have explored using things like microwave energy to help drive some of the chemical reactions. This can often dramatically reduce the reaction times needed and lower the temperatures required, which saves energy and can potentially reduce waste.
That's good to hear. So once the basic pioglitazone molecule is synthesized, what's next?
After the core structure is built, there are usually additional steps to attach specific chemical groups onto it at very precise locations. This might involve reactions like something called novidiadral condensation to add certain functional parts.
Sounds complex.
It involves careful control. Then, crucially, the synthesized pioglitazone needs to be purified to meet incredibly strict quality and purity standards set by regulatory agencies.
Right. Can't have impurities.
Exactly. And finally, the pure active drug substance is formulated into the final dosage form, usually tablets. This involves mixing the pioglitazone with various inactive ingredients called excipients.
Excipients, what do they do?
They serve many purposes. They help bind the tablet together, control how quickly it dissolves in your stomach or intestine, ensure stability over time, maybe affect the color or coating. They're essential for making a functional, stable pill.
And what about generic versions? We see pioglitazone from different companies now.
Yes. When the patents on the original brand name drug, Actos, expired, other companies could start making generic versions, like Pioglitazone Activus or Pioglitazone Curca you might see in Europe, or various generics in the U.S.
Do they have to make it the exact same way?
Not necessarily the exact same process, but they absolutely must demonstrate to regulators through rigorous testing that their generic product is bioequivalent to the original,
Bioequivalent meaning?
meaning it gets absorbed into the bloodstream at the same rate and to the same extent as the brand name drug. Essentially, it delivers the same amount of active ingredient to your body in the same way, ensuring it should work just as effectively and safely.
That makes sense. Ensures people get consistent treatment, whether it's brand or generic. Okay, now let's move into maybe the more controversial part of the story. The regulatory trajectory and the legal issues surrounding pioglitazone. When did it first get approved?
So Pioglitazone, marketed as Actos, first received its authorization for use in the European Union back in October 2000. The U.S. approval was around the same time, I believe 1999.
Okay, so early 2000s. And you mentioned controversy. I assume that relates mainly to the safety concerns we touched on earlier.
Yes, primarily. Its regulatory journey since then has really been marked by significant scrutiny, especially regarding that potential association with an increased risk of bladder cancer.
Right, the bladder cancer link. That became a really big deal, didn't it?
It absolutely did. The challenge was that findings from different studies, mostly observational studies looking back at patient records, weren't entirely consistent.
How so?
Some studies seemed to show a statistically significant increased risk, maybe particularly with longer use or higher doses. But other studies didn't find a clear link. This inconsistency, this lack of a completely clear consensus, made things very difficult for regulators.
So conflicting signals from the research. How did regulatory agencies react to that uncertainty?
Well, it led to significant action. In 2011, things really came to a head. Both France and Germany took the step of actually suspending the use of pioglitazone within their countries as a precautionary measure, based on the data they reviewed.
Wow, suspension. That's serious.
It was. The European Medicines Agency, the EMA, conducted its own comprehensive review of all the available evidence and ended up issuing updated recommendations, basically tightening the conditions for its use and emphasizing the need to weigh risks and benefits carefully.
And what about the FDA in the U.S.?
The FDA also took action. They updated the drug labels for pioglitazone to include much stronger warnings about the potential risk of bladder cancer. The advice became to avoid using it in patients who currently had active bladder cancer and to use it only with extreme caution after careful consideration of benefits versus risks in anyone with a prior history of bladder cancer.
So heightened warnings and restrictions on use. This must have also triggered legal action from patients, right? People who developed bladder cancer after taking the drug.
Yes, inevitably. Thousands upon thousands of lawsuits were filed against Takeda, the manufacturer of Actos. Eli Lilly was also involved initially in the U.S. marketing and faced lawsuits too.
What were the main claims in these lawsuits?
The core allegation was that the companies knew, or should have known, about the potential link between Actos use and bladder cancer, and that they failed to provide adequate warnings about this risk to both patients and doctors in a timely manner.
And did these lawsuits go anywhere?
Oh yes, they had a huge impact. Many of the federal cases in the U.S. were consolidated into what's called a multi-district litigation, or MDL, to manage them more efficiently. Some of the early bellwether trials test cases essentially resulted in very large jury verdicts for the plaintiffs.
I think I remember hearing about one massive verdict.
It probably did. There was one particularly notable case where the jury awarded an absolutely staggering $9 billion in punitive damages. Now, that amount was later significantly reduced by the judge, as often happens, but it certainly sent shockwaves.
$9 billion, even reduced. That's incredible. How did it all end?
Well, facing potentially thousands more trials and uncertain outcomes, Takeda eventually decided to pursue a global settlement. In 2015, they reached an agreement to pay approximately $2.4 billion to resolve the vast majority of these Actos bladder cancer lawsuits.
$2.4 billion. Still a massive amount.
Absolutely. It's important to note, though, that, as is common in these types of mass tort settlements, Takeda did not admit any liability or wrongdoing as part of the agreement.
And were there conditions for patients to be part of that settlement?
Yes, generally, to be eligible, individuals needed to have been diagnosed with bladder cancer, and crucially, they usually had to have started taking Actos before the label was updated with the stronger warnings in December 2011. The argument being that after that date, the risk information was more readily available.
Okay, a really complex and significant legal saga for this drug. Now, beyond the bladder cancer issue, Were there other safety concerns that regulators flagged or included in warnings?
Yes, definitely. Bladder cancer got the most headlines. But pioglitazone has been associated with other important potential side effects, too. One quite common one is edema, which is fluid retention or swelling.
Edema. Is that serious?
It can be, especially because it seems to be dose-related more likely at higher doses. And this fluid retention can worsen existing heart failure, or even contribute to new cases of congestive heart failure in people who are susceptible.
Ah, so that links to heart health too.
Exactly. And because of that risk, pioglitazone is actually contraindicated again. Shouldn't be used in patients who have more severe stages of heart failure, what's known as NYHA class 3 or 4 heart failure.
Okay. Any other major concerns?
Another one that emerged is an increased risk of bone fractures. This seemed particularly noticeable in women and tended to involve non-vertebral fractures, so fractures in the arms, legs, hands, feet, rather than the spine.
Fractures. Huh. That seems unexpected for a diabetes drug.
It was somewhat unexpected, yes. And one more thing to mention is a potential, though less common, risk of developing macular edema. That's swelling in the back of the eye that can affect vision. So any vision changes should be reported to a doctor.
Wow. So bladder cancer, fluid retention, heart failure risk, fractures, potential eye issues. It really underscores the need for careful patient selection and monitoring, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's definitely a medication where the potential benefits for blood sugar control have to be very carefully weighed against this range of possible risks for each individual patient. Open communication between doctor and patient is key.
You mentioned earlier how France and Germany suspended it. What about other parts of the world? Did regulations differ elsewhere? You mentioned India briefly.
Right, India is an interesting case study in how different regulatory systems can sometimes arrive at different conclusions, or at least take different actions. Pioglitazone was, believe it or not, briefly banned in India at one point.
Banned entirely.
Yes, but that ban was later revoked. Part of the discussion there involves some studies conducted within India. These studies suggested that perhaps because the average doses used in India might be lower, or maybe because the baseline incidence of bladder cancer in the population is different, or maybe just due to limitations like smaller sample sizes in some studies.
Right.
The association between pioglitazone and bladder cancer wasn't found to be statistically significant in some of those specific Indian studies. So the regulatory stance there evolved differently than in Europe or the US.
Fascinating. It really shows how complex drug regulation can be on a global scale. Okay, let's shift gears again and talk about the money side of things, the economic impact of pioglitazone. It's been around a while, generics are available.
Yes, the market for pioglitazone has been, and likely still is, quite significant. That's driven simply by the sheer number of people living with type 2 diabetes around the world.
A huge potential patient base.
Exactly. And that market includes not just the original brand, Actos, but now all the various generic versions, plus combination pills that include pioglitazone alongside other drugs like metformin pioglitazone combinations, which are quite common.
Has the arrival of generics made a big difference in cost?
Oh, almost certainly. When those first generics hit the market, the FDA approved the first generic Actos in the U.S. in 2012, and European approvals for generics like Pioglitazone Activus and Carica were around the same time. That typically leads to significant price competition.
Right.
So the overall cost of treatment with pioglitazone has likely come down substantially, which in turn makes it more affordable and accessible for more patients and healthcare systems.
But on the flip side, those massive legal settlements we talked about must have had a pretty hefty financial impact on Takeda, the originator company.
Undoubtedly. Paying out $2.4 billion to settle lawsuits is a major financial event for any company, even a large pharmaceutical firm. That's a direct economic consequence of the safety controversies.
Beyond just cost and settlements, has pioglitazone influenced the broader diabetes drug market economically?
I'd say yes in a couple of ways. The development and marketing of pioglitazone and its TZD competitors definitely spurred innovation and investment in diabetes research back in the day, focusing attention on that insulin sensitization pathway.
Right, pushing the science forward.
Exactly. And even now, ongoing research continues to explore potential new uses for pioglitazone, or to refine our understanding of its long-term effects, both good and bad. And those findings can continue to influence its economic value and its place in treatment guidelines relative to newer agents.
Okay, finally, let's think about the cultural influence, if you can call it that. Has the story of pioglitazone shaped how we think or talk about diabetes, medications, or drug safety more broadly?
I think it has, yeah. The whole pioglitazone saga, especially the controversies, serves as a really potent case study. It highlights the complexities involved in managing a chronic disease like type 2 diabetes over many years, often with multiple medications.
And the safety issues definitely brought things into public focus.
Absolutely. The concerns, particularly around bladder cancer, really fueled the public discourse and continue to about drug safety in general. It made people ask questions about how drugs are tested, how risks are monitored after approval, that's called post-market surveillance, how regulatory agencies make decisions, and what responsibilities pharmaceutical companies have to be transparent about potential risks.
You can definitely see those themes playing out online, in patient forums and discussions about different drugs.
You really can. People share experiences, concerns about side effects, questions about whether a drug is truly safe or effective for them. Pioglitazone's story is part of that larger conversation.
Has it changed how doctors and patients talk about these drugs?
I think it's contributed to a greater awareness on both sides of the need for careful monitoring and really individualized risk-benefit assessment. It's pushed for better communication about not just the potential upsides of a medication, but the potential downsides too.
And maybe shifted the scientific focus a bit too.
Yes, definitely. As we discussed, the development of pioglitazone as an insulin sensitizer was important because it really highlighted the critical role of insulin resistance in type 2 diabetes. It helped shift the focus partly away from just thinking about stimulating more insulin secretion towards addressing how well the body uses the insulin it has.
Right.
And of course, more recently, the landscape has shifted again with the arrival of newer classes of diabetes drugs like SGLT2 inhibitors and GLP-1 receptor agonists that have shown clear cardiovascular benefits in major trials. That's definitely impacted where an older drug like pioglitazone now fits into the treatment algorithms. It reflects a dynamic, evolving understanding of how best to manage diabetes and its complications.
It's a constantly changing field. Okay, so let's try to wrap this up. For you, the listener, who might be trying to process all this information, what are the key takeaways from our deep dive into pioglitazone?
Well, I think the main thing is that pioglitazone represents a really unique way to tackle type 2 diabetes by focusing on that core problem of insulin resistance. It can be an effective tool for lowering blood sugar. But its journey has been complex. It's shown promise, but it's also been marked by significant safety concerns, especially the bladder cancer risk, but also the issues around edema, heart failure, and fractures. It's a reminder that few medications come without potential downsides. And our scientific understanding of exactly how it works and the full balance of its effects is something that continues to evolve even now.
So hopefully this discussion is giving you a much clearer understanding of pioglitazone, moving beyond just seeing the name on a pill bottle. Understanding its history, the science behind it, the regulatory ups and downs, really empowers you, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It equips you to have more informed, more confident conversations with your doctor or pharmacist about your own health, or perhaps the health of someone you care about who might be taking this medication.
And as we look ahead, maybe a final provocative thought to leave you with.
Yeah, I think considering everything we've discussed, the ongoing research, the established role, but also the known risks, and importantly, the emergence of these newer diabetes treatments with proven cardiovascular benefits, it really raises a fascinating question for the future, doesn't it?
Which is?
What will the role of insulin sensitizer or the pioglitazone actually be in the diabetes treatment landscape 5, 10, 20 years from now? How do we continue to balance the established efficacy of older drugs like this with our evolving knowledge of their long-term safety and the growing availability of potentially safer or more beneficial alternatives?
Yeah.
It's a story that's definitely still unfolding.